Good morning. It's cold outside. The cats and I are awake. The children are asleep. Dogs and husband are cuddled and warm up in bed. So I'm going to sip my coffee. I'm going to look at my Goodreads list. And we're going to talk about my book reviews for 2024. I'm going to share my Goodreads, but you're going to notice that, unfortunately, some of the books that I did read didn't show up. So I'm going to talk about books that you're not going to see on the list, but please know I did read them. I don't know why Goodreads decided that book one of Mother of Learning didn't count when it counted books two, three, and four. Or in the Murderbot series, it decided that I read book four before I read book one. Technology and I have never been good friends, but we move on. Coffee, it warms my soul. I started off 2024 with reading a book by Christopher Paolini called To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. Now, I had never read Christopher Paolini before. It was my introduction to the author. And so I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that he was popular. And I thought, well, a popular author is popular for a reason, so let's give him a go. The opening of this book is really, really well done. It really had me in the beginning, but I did not finish this book. And I gave it a 3-star because the opening, the intro, the beginning 5, 6 chapters of the book are really well written. But the rest of the book was one, not what I wanted, especially from the intro, and two, I didn't understand the shift in the writing. If you read the book, you will understand. And like I said, he's a popular author, and if this is how his books are written and people love them, then it's just my opinion. I didn't like it, but you may. From there, I started what's known as Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons by the author Selkie Myth. And this one was a recommendation by my husband. And I have to say, the first book, Oathbound Healer, I really enjoyed. It takes a minute to get the story moving, as most series do. But unlike To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, the tone and pitch and overall movement of the story doesn't change in such a jarring way that you don't feel like you're reading two different stories. And I appreciate that. I did go through, so it's Oathbound Healer, and then Adventures in the Argo, Ranger's Dawn, Beneath or Beyond the Wall, Moon Veiled Journeys, and Immortal Moments. Now, Immortal Moments, after that book, I kind of needed a break. And so I paused reading Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons, and I moved to Where the Forest Meets the Stars by Glendy Vandera. And this book was something that I seem to have a tendency to pick up books where the beginning is interesting, but then the rest of the book kind of, the tone of it changes. And this is one of them. Where the Forest Meets the Stars is basically healing trauma, and there are multiple ways of looking at trauma and what trauma is at the end of the day. And so, from that perspective, this book is quite interesting. But the first half of the book is really, really good. It's around the second half of the book that it almost feels as if the author needed to speed it up. It very much goes from a nicely, logically paced section of story to hurry up and finish. And while that is jarring, overall, it's not a bad book. I gave it a 4, but if you're looking for something that's in depth, this isn't it. Now, from Where the Forest Meets the Stars, I then returned to Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons and returned to Remus, which is the 7th book in the series. And I gave this book a 3 just because sometimes with Selkie myth, the characterization of certain people is a bit inconsistent. And this was very much a people story centered book. There wasn't a lot of adventures or anything like that. And it also kind of had the feeling that the author was bored of the story. And so, if you're going to read these books, Beneath the Dragon Eye Moon, I would say stopping at Return to Remus would be a good place. My husband loves the entire series, um, but I feel that he he could have stopped here and it would have been just fine. Now, I did read the 8th book in the series, which is called New Horizons. It was my second DNF, just to give you an idea. Um, didn't like it, didn't feel a connection with the story anymore. And so, but like I said, my husband loved what the author did in this book. I did not. So, opinions. But before I went to New Horizons, I had 2 other books that I read. I read the first book in the Threadbare series, which is called Stuff and Nonsense. What an interesting concept for golems. I personally loved this book up until the ending. Oh, Andrew, why? Why did you have to do that to the ending of this book? Now, again, my opinion, I gave it a 3 because I really disliked the ending that much. But it was such an interesting rest of the book. I do recommend reading it. Again, why? The ending, you could have done something so much more interesting than what you did, but I'm not the author. And I did, after that, finally, don't judge me, I finally read Binti. And it's such a good book. I love books that are told from a perspective that I did not grow up with. I am a white American female, and I love hearing stories from not that slant. And so Binti was just such a lovely change up, and I do recommend it. It's not long, but within that short amount of story, and yes, I know it's part of a series, but I don't think you need to read past it. The first book by itself is such a well-contained story that I recommend it. I liked it so much. And then I read New Horizons, and then I I was recommended one hell of a series to go into. And this one I highly recommend doing the audiobook. It is Van Queer the Dragon. And this, I did read book one. You'll see on my Goodreads that book one doesn't show up. Goodreads did not record it for whatever reason. I did read it and I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. And you're going to find that the term minion is going to be something that you use in jokes. And find you some good people who have also read Van Queer so you can use it in conversation. My husband and I will yell minion at each other just for giggles. And I read through the entire series. And yes, I count audiobooks as reading because not every person has access or the capability of using the physical books. And if we don't want to exclude people who can't read or a person that is having sight problems and doesn't have the money to pay for a braille copy of the book, we count audiobooks. I personally use Audible, but I know that there are a number of different options out there. But Van Queer, the narrator, he just does such a good job. And those books are just so much fun. And then I stepped into the world of Beware of Chicken. And again, Goodreads doesn't like to count book one of series, but I did read book one. Now, Beware of Chicken is a cultivation series. It's so sweet. It's almost unnecessary that it be a cultivation story. But I will say this, I adore the side characters in this book series. I absolutely adore them. And I got to book 3 or 4 in this series. I think I stopped at 3. I think I didn't get book 4. But regardless, the side characters are worth the read on this because it's set in a farm and the animals are sentient and they are just chef's kiss. They're fun and they're silly and they each have a purpose and they love their purpose and it's so nice. You don't even need to worry about the main character. The side characters will get you through. And then I did book 12 of The Wandering Inn. That is a series I've been doing for a few years now. And The Witch of Webs, if you know anything about The Wandering Inn, you know that it's very long, very detailed, but it's not boring. And I really enjoyed The Witch of Webs. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. I gave it a 4-star, but I always recommend the book series. The web series surrounding it is far ahead of the audiobooks, just as a forewarning. Don't join the Discord. You'll be lost and full of spoilers. It's not pleasant. Now, after that, I started the Mother of Learning series. Again, Goodreads. You don't like my book ones. Not appreciated. I very much enjoyed the series. I very much enjoyed the way in which it uses time loops in a more meaningful and logical manner when it comes to the character. It basically doesn't treat you like you're an idiot in understanding what is happening and why it's happening. I did all 4 books. This was an audiobook that I did, and I enjoyed it a great deal. Would recommend. The 4th book in the series, getting through the first 3 books to get the setup for the 4th book. The 4th book is so good, but you need to read the first 3 books to get there. You got to do your homework, and it's worth it. After that, I was recommended, because I enjoyed Mother of Learning. It's called The Limitless Lands. To be honest, I did not like this book series. I could see where people would. It very much has that Ready Player One, going into a game and living vicariously through your characters. And I did like Ready Player One, the book, not the movie. The movie was terrible. Shame on you for making that movie. There was something halting about Limitless Lands, and it just didn't allow me to connect with it in any meaningful way. I don't recommend it, but if you enjoyed books where the player is going into a VR setting and there's battles and magic and progressive fantasy and stuff, you'll probably like it. But like I said, I didn't. From there, I then started the way that this book was sold to me. I have to say, I started Heretical Fishing by Haylock Jobson. And it's a book about a man who likes fishing and he's not supposed to fish. That's how it was sold to me. And it is so much more than that. But sometimes you can't really help people with the way they describe things. Um, it's a great book. It's cozy, it's funny, there's some very deep and emotional moments in it. Um, but it's just overall a really nice book. I ended up reading books 2 and 3 because of how much I enjoyed book 1. Um, book 2 is just as nice as book 1. Book 3, not so much. I don't know what happened, but books 1 and 2, fabulous. If you're looking for something with that Australian slant, this is for you. It's an Australian author, and if you do the audiobook, an Australian reader, and I adore him. He does such good work. Um, I then continued, I've been doing the Primal Hunter series, and I did book 7, and I liked it. It was good. I have to say, Zogarth, who is the name of the author, it's his pen name. Zogarth has a way of writing this book series in that it starts off good, and then I kind of don't care, but then he ends his book so well. He really gets me hook, line, and sinker. Every time, Zogarth. Every single time. Primal Hunter, by the way, is one of those book series I don't normally recommend just because you know how it's going to go. It's very much a paint by numbers, but it's just such a fun book when you're going through series over and over again. But it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. It's kind of like my guilty pleasure. Now from there was my absolute favorite book from 2024, and that is Forging Hephaestus, which is the first book in the Villain's Code. Should have been the Villain's Codex, like it is in the book, but Villain's Code is what it's called. I love this book. I think everyone should read this book. It is a story about superheroes and villains from the villain's perspective. I'm not going to spoil it. I have an entire rant about this book that's full of spoilers. I love this book. I love this book so much, and I recommend it to anyone who wants a change up from. I grew up reading Marvel and watching the cartoons and everything. It's kind of like Marvel villain, but they didn't go the boys route and make it super hyper gross. It's just really nice. I recommend it. My third DNF of the year came after that, though. The Frozen Realm, 12 miles below. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No, thank you. No. No, thank you. I didn't get past like the first 3 chapters on this one. Interesting concept, but no. No, thank you. My husband finished it. I'll let you ask his opinion on it. I have nothing positive to say, and therefore I'm going to say nothing at all other than I did not finish it. From there, I read a book called Father of Constructs. This book was fun. This book I enjoyed. This book was so much fun that I did the second book in the series. And I have to say, for all the positive that I can say about Father of Constructs, I cannot say about Master of Steel. Master of Steel is one of those, we're going along at a nice, gentle pace. We're filling in all the blanks. We're leaving all the information on the table to, I have no idea what's going on. I legitimately don't know what's going on. And frankly, if you don't have time for me, I don't have time for you. So I highly recommend reading book 1 of Father of Constructs, which is just Father of Constructs, and don't worry about the rest. I may go back to the series, but I don't know what the author was thinking with book 2. From there, I did the next Wandering In book, book 13, The Empress of Beasts. Fabulous book. This one I gave 5 stars to because it really is that good. Then I did Bones of the Past, which is the Villain's Code number 2. Good book. Be prepared to be frustrated or crying at the end. I was in tears. It's good, but be prepared. Then I did Villains Vignettes, Volume 1. This is from the Villain's Code as well, but these are side stories. Drew Hayes does a really good job of building these worlds out in a manner that is logical and enjoyable. The first book, fabulous. I loved it. I raved about it. Like I stopped reading to rave about it with my husband, and he loved it too. The other 2 in the book, not so much. But the first one's excellent. From there, I did The Primal Hunter 8. This one was mid, very mid, but when you're reading any of the Primal Hunter books, again, you know what you're getting. So, and then I started a book series called The Murderbot Diaries. And I don't know what happened with Goodreads. It put everything out of order. I promise I read my books in order. I promise I start at book 1 and I end at book nil. I liked these books. I genuinely really liked these books. The first book is All Systems Red. I liked it. It's a little odd because you have to understand that it's set in the future, and the way in which humanity exists at that time is so different from how we exist today. And once I was able to kind of disconnect my own biases against certain things in the books, I really enjoyed them. They're very short, they're not complicated. You're not going to get bogged down in technical details or anything like that. It's very much a narrative told from a very humanistic on human perspective, and I liked them. I have not finished the series, but that is just because I didn't have access to the last two books. I got to book 6, I believe. I got to book 6, and there's 8 books in the series. Um, Love it. Recommend it. If you like sci fi, you'll enjoy it. Again, the author doesn't bog you down. The author is Martha Wells. She doesn't bog you down in unnecessary details that makes you go, but how is that logical? Nope. We don't worry about that. And I love her for doing that. Thank you. I did take a break. We took a road trip with our children. And so we didn't read the Murder Bots books with the kids in the car. They're a little violent. And we did Rover Powered. It's Drew Hayes who did The Villain's Code and also did Superpowered, which I did read this year. Superhero dog. That's it. It's a superhero dog in a magical world, and it's cute. My kids liked it. It's not his best writing, but I do appreciate the really nice story. And then there I got to book 6 of the Murder Bots Diaries. And then I moved to, because I enjoyed the Villain's Code books so much, I moved to the first series that Drew Hayes wrote in that kind of superhero in the real world genre. And I started Superpowers. And funny enough, Goodreads did log that I read book 1, but it did not log that I read book 2. Thanks. Um, Superpowers is good. It's consistent. It's not as good as the Villains series, but that just comes from it being the first series he wrote. I like the concept, I like the idea, I like how the characters are written, I like how the conflicts are dealt with. I like the whole package. There are certain things that happen in the books that you go, that doesn't seem logical. But then, you know, you're dealing with a world where people can fly. So, kind of had to curve my expectations a little bit. Let's see. Master of Steel 2, do not recommend. Next, Industrial Strength Magic. This book is for teenagers. This book is written from the perspective of teenagers, and it is definitely written for teenagers. It has that crude humor for your late teens. It has some angsty sexual tension, things like that. It has some really fun moments in it. If you're looking for a book that you have no expectations of enjoying, you just want to expand your reading experiences, Industrial Strength Magic is definitely a book where you're going to go, I don't know if I'm comfortable with this book anymore. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Then the third Heretical Fishing book came out. I did not enjoy it. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Try not to put spoilers in my opinions. Then I did the 14th book in the Wandering Inn, Hell's Wardens. That book caught me off guard. interesting story that's being told here, but not my favorite. And sometimes with The Wandering Inn, because the series is so long, and when you have a web series put into book format, you forget how wide and big a comic book series can be when it's online. There's no limitations for the depth and the breadth that a story can go. Whereas when you have paperback, you have those physical, spatial limitations. And Hell's Wardens definitely felt like one of those books. I still recommend the whole series, though. I will never not recommend them. And then from there, I found out that for superpowers, there is a story that happens in between books 2 and 3 called Corpies. I loved this book. This book was a lot of fun. So if you like superpowers, you'll like this one. I just really enjoyed it. And then I finished out the year with the 9th Primal Hunter book. Now, I'm going to say this at the end because neither book registered in my 2024 reading, but I read books 1 and 2 of the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, which is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Both of those books are 3 to 4 stars, so I don't know. They're decent books, especially if you skip the spicy parts. The story holds together without needing those bits and pieces, which sometimes you don't run into. So my total for Goodreads was the 52 books that did register. It came out to 29,319 pages. The 2 books that I rated 5-star this year were The Wandering Inn, The Empress of Beasts, and Mother of Learning, Arc 4, which is book 4. Again, both of those books, you have to get to the setup of them. So Mother of Learning is much more accessible because it's only 3 books to get to the 4th book, but it is definitely worth it. Surprisingly, if you ever touch the Wandering Inn series, you'll know why this is surprising, but surprisingly, the longest book that I read was Superpowers Year 4, which surprises me. Let's see. The most common as fantasy, science fiction, and fiction. That is a shock to no one. But that is it. That is my 2024. Quite a few books, quite a few things, and a lot of books that never even made it onto the Goodreads list. But that's okay. I read anywhere from 52 to 100 books a year, so I'm not offended. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for spending this quiet morning with me. I'm going to continue to sip my coffee and prepare for my children to wake up. Have a good day.